I want you to think about the last thing you did in your garden that you were absolutely 100% certain was correct. Could have been how you watered, how you pruned, how you planted, how you staked a tree. Whatever it was, there is a very real chance you were doing it completely wrong, and nobody ever told you. Today, I'm going to walk you through 10 landscaping myths that are so deeply embedded in how people garden that even experienced homeowners still believe them. And some of them, I have to be honest with you, I believed for years myself. Myth 1. Gravel in the bottom of a pot improves drainage. We might as well start with the granddaddy of all gardening myths. The one that has been passed around garden centers and backyard fences since probably 1980 or earlier. The idea that if you put a layer of gravel or rocks in the bottom of a pot before you add your soil, you are going to improve drainage and your plant is going to thrive. It sounds so logical. Water falls down, gravel is at the bottom, water drains through the gravel, everyone is happy. Except that is not at all what happens. There is a concept in soil science called the perched water table. And what it means in simple terms is this. Water does not move from a finer material into a coarser material until that finer material is completely saturated. So when you put gravel under your potting soil, the water hits that boundary between the soil and the gravel, and it stops. It sits there. It actually raises the level of saturation in the soil above the gravel. So instead of improving drainage, you have made the drainage worse. You have essentially created a soggy layer right in the zone where your roots are living. Now here's the really frustrating part. This myth is so old and so widely believed that you will still see it repeated on gardening blogs, on packaging, sometimes even from people who should genuinely know better. I have seen it in print. In the year we are living in. What you actually want to do is use a good quality potting mix that is appropriate for the plant you are growing. Make sure your pot has adequate drainage holes, and I mean real drainage holes, not one tiny little hole in the center that a pencil would struggle to fit through. The soil does the work. The gravel just gets in the way. So if you have been doing this, no judgment, I promise. But go ahead and stop. Your plants will quietly thank you. Myth 2. Wilting plants always mean they need water. This one trips up so many people, and I completely understand why. You walk outside on a hot afternoon, you see your tomatoes drooping like they've given up on life, and the natural human instinct is to grab the hose immediately. It feels like the caring thing to do. And caring for your plants is a good impulse. But in this case, it can actually cause real harm. Here's what's actually going on. On a very hot day, and I'm talking about those afternoons where you walk outside and immediately reconsider your life choices. Many plants, and tomatoes are a perfect example of this, will wilt as a direct response to heat. Not thirst, heat. The plant is essentially reducing its surface area and slowing its transpiration to protect itself. It's a stress response. It's the plant doing exactly what it's supposed to do to survive. And here's where the mistake happens. If you water that plant in the heat of the afternoon, you are now giving it heat and excess water at the same time. And that combination, heat plus overwatering, is actually more damaging than heat plus a little bit of drought stress. You can cause root problems, you can encourage disease, you can create conditions in the soil that are genuinely harmful to the plant. So what do you do instead? You wait. I know that sounds hard when your tomatoes look like wet paper bags. But you come back in the morning. You check the plant again before the heat of the day has set in. If that plant still looks wilted in the morning, then yes, it needs water. But if it has perked back up and looks perfectly fine, then it was just responding to the heat, and you did the right thing by leaving it alone. Morning is when you assess. Afternoon is when you leave well enough alone. Myth 3. Topping a tree controls its height. This is the one that really gets me, because not only is it a myth, it is one of the most destructive things you can do to a tree, and people do it constantly with the very best of intentions. The thinking goes like this. The tree is getting too tall, so I'll cut the top off, and it will stay at a manageable height. Simple, logical, completely wrong. When you top a tree, meaning you cut off the main central leaders or make large heading cuts across the top, what happens is not what you expected. The tree responds to that trauma by sending up a burst of new shoots right below those cuts. And these new shoots are fast-growing, weakly attached, and structurally much more fragile than the original branches. Over time, the tree does not stay small. It actually goes back to roughly the same height, sometimes faster than before, but now it is doing it with weak wood that is more prone to breaking in wind or storms. And on top of all of that, no pun intended, a topped tree is an ugly tree. There is really no polite way to say it. That flat-topped silhouette with the bunch of wild sprouts shooting up from it is not what anybody actually wanted when they started. So what do you do instead if a tree is genuinely getting too large for its space? There are two approaches that actually work. The first is thinning cuts. Instead of cutting branches in half, you remove them entirely, going all the way back to where they originate. This reduces the overall density and the weight of the tree while keeping its natural shape. The second approach is called drop crotching, which I will admit sounds like something that should come with a warning label, but it is actually a very sound pruning technique. Drop crotching means you reduce the length of a branch by cutting it back to a side branch that is large enough to take over as the new leader. The tree stays looking natural, the height is genuinely managed, and you are not sending it into a spiral of weak regrowth. The other strategy, and this is the one people don't use enough, is timing. If you prune a tree right after it has just put on a flush of new spring growth, you are removing the very material the tree was going to use through photosynthesis to fuel more growth. You are essentially tricking the tree into slowing down. That is the smart, elegant way to manage size over time. Myth 4. Native plants don't need any care. I love native plants. I genuinely do. They are usually better for the environment, better for local wildlife, better for water use over the long term. And because of all of that, there has grown up around native planting this idea that you just put them in the ground and then go live your life because they're native, so they take care of themselves. That is not quite how it works. The goal of choosing native plants is absolutely sound. After they are established, they typically need far less water, far less maintenance, and far less intervention than exotic or ornamental species. That part is true, but the key phrase there is after they are established. And establishment can be a sensitive, sometimes fragile process that requires just as much attention as planting anything else. A lot of native plants are actually quite particular about getting started. They need proper planting, appropriate watering during that initial establishment window, and the right conditions to get their root systems anchored in. Skip that, and you will lose them, and then you will come back and say the natives didn't work in my garden. They worked fine. They just needed you to show up for the first season or two. There is also a more nuanced issue, and this is the one people don't think about enough. Native to where, exactly? California is a good example of this. Our state tree is the coast redwood, and it is a California native, but it grows specifically in foggy coastal regions because it relies on summer fog for moisture. You take that tree and plant it in an inland valley with hot, dry summers and no fog, and it will not thrive just because it is a California native. The conditions have to match. Native to your state is not the same thing as native to your exact microclimate. And then there is a whole category of California natives that are very easy to love to death. Plants like ceanothus and many of the salvias genuinely want dry conditions in summer, and will struggle if you water them the same way you water everything else. So research your specific plants, give them the attention they need during establishment, and then step back. That's when you get to enjoy the low-maintenance payoff you were promised. Myth 5. Filling planting holes with rich soil amendments helps new plants. This one feels so right. You are planting something new, and you want it to thrive, so you dig a hole and you fill it with the best, richest, most nutrient-dense amended soil you can find. Compost, potting mix, maybe some wood-based material. You are giving that plant a first-class experience. And your plant is going to sit in that hole and not go anywhere. This is what soil scientists call the bathtub effect. And once you hear the explanation, you will not be able to unsee it. When you fill that planting hole with a very different material than the surrounding native soil, you create a distinct boundary. Water does not want to cross that boundary easily. It tends to stay inside the zone of the amended material. And the roots of your plant, being perfectly rational living things, also tend to stay inside that nice, comfortable amended pocket, rather than pushing out into the native soil. Which means the plant never fully establishes. It stays contained, root-bound within the hole you dug for it, and it never gets access to the broader resource base of the surrounding ground. What most soil scientists recommend, and this is consistent across a lot of research, is to use the native soil as your backfill as much as possible. You are training those roots to go out and explore, because the good stuff is out there in the native soil, not packed into the hole. Now, where we add our own recommendation on top of that is with inoculants. You can amend the backfill with biological products, things that introduce beneficial bacteria and fungi into the soil. And those living organisms can then spread out into the native soil and build up a healthy, active ecosystem around the roots. That is very different from creating an isolated pocket of fluffy imported soil that the roots never want to leave. Maith sisel. More fertilizer means healthier, greener plants. I think this one exists because fertilizer works so visibly and so quickly that it creates a very human temptation to just use more of it. You put fertilizer down, things get green, things grow. It is very satisfying. So surely twice as much fertilizer means twice as good, right? No. And if you are using synthetic fertilizer, no with a capital N and some underlining. Synthetic fertilizers, particularly in summer when temperatures are high and soil conditions are volatile, can burn your plants. And I mean that quite literally. The salt concentration from over-applied synthetic fertilizer draws moisture out of the roots through osmosis and can cause significant damage. Brown tips, scorched leaves, damaged root systems, in some cases complete plant death. And it is not a gradual, gentle decline. It can happen fast. There is also a subtler problem with over-fertilizing that people don't think about as much. If you are growing vegetables or fruit-bearing plants and you push too much nitrogen fertilizer, you end up with spectacular, lush, gorgeous, green, vegetative growth and absolutely no fruit production. The plant is putting all of its energy into leaves because you told it to. It looks healthy in a very misleading way, but you are not getting the actual result you wanted. The better approach, especially in summer, is to move toward organic fertilizers that do not carry the same burn risk. A good organic product can go down in the middle of summer, and even if you do not water it in immediately, it is not going to cause damage. Organic fertilizers also work synergistically with the life in your soil. They feed the microbes that feed the plants, rather than just dumping nutrients directly into the root zone. Follow the label. Do not assume more is better, and in summer especially, be conservative. The goal is steady, healthy growth, not plants that have had too much coffee. Myth 7. All trees need to be staked when planted. Here is a myth that actually has an interesting nuance to it, because the reality is not that staking is always wrong. The reality is that the goal should always be to not stake if you can avoid it, and here is why. Trees develop trunk strength through movement. When the wind blows and a young tree sways, that movement triggers a biological response that causes the trunk to thicken and strengthen over time. A tree that is staked rigidly cannot move, cannot develop that response, and grows a trunk that is the same diameter from the base to the top. What we call poor caliper taper, which means it has no structural strength and is actually more vulnerable to blowing over once it gets top heavy. So if a tree can stand up on its own and grow reasonably straight without staking, do not stake it. Leave it alone. Let it move in the wind. It will become a stronger tree faster. Now, the exception. And this is a real exception, not a small one. A lot of trees that come out of nurseries have been grown in a way that does not develop trunk strength. They are tall and they look good, but that uniform caliper from bottom to top tells you there is not much strength there. If you plant one of those trees and it cannot stand up straight, or if your site has significant wind exposure, then yes, you stake it. But you stake it loosely. You give it room to move. And you remove the stakes as soon as the tree can support itself. Staking is a temporary assist, not a permanent solution. You need to aerate and dethatch your lawn. Every single year, every spring and every fall, you see people out there with aerators and dethatchers, pulling plugs and raking out thatch like it is a moral obligation. And I understand it. The logic seems solid. Compacted soil and thick thatch both hurt your lawn, so you address them mechanically every year. But you are treating the symptoms of a problem rather than fixing the actual problem. Let me explain what causes thatch first. Thatch is a layer of decomposing organic matter that builds up between the grass blades and the soil surface. Old roots, dead grass, that kind of thing. And it builds up quickly when you have soil that lacks biological life, particularly when you rely heavily on synthetic fertilizers, because synthetic fertilizers do not feed the soil. They feed the plant directly and actually suppress some of the microbial activity that would otherwise break that organic matter down naturally. If you build your soil with the right beneficial bacteria, beneficial fungi, good protozoa, all the living components of a genuinely healthy soil ecosystem, then that life in the soil will break down the thatch layer for you. It is biological decomposition doing the work that you were trying to do with the machine. Same principle applies to aeration. Physical aeration with a machine softens compacted soil and creates channels for water and air to move through, but healthy soil life does the same thing biologically. Earthworms alone do more for soil structure than most aerating machines. So if you are building and feeding the life in your soil properly, over time you should find yourself needing to reach for the aerator less and less. Not never necessarily, but less. Invest in the soil, and it starts doing the maintenance for you. Myth 9. Tree pruning compound protects and heals cuts. You have seen it. That black sticky stuff, or sometimes a spray compound, that people paint over pruning cuts to seal them. The idea is that you are protecting the wound, preventing disease and pests from getting in, and helping the tree heal faster. And it sounds so sensible that this myth has been around for decades. The reality is almost exactly the opposite. Trees heal pruning cuts through a process called compartmentalization. The tree forms a callus of new tissue that grows in from the edges of the cut and eventually seals the wound. This process works best with good air circulation and a clean, properly made cut. What it does not need, and actually does not benefit from, is being covered in a layer of compound. What happens when you apply those products over time is they dry out. They crack. They separate from the wood. And in those cracks and breaks, you create small protected pockets that are ideal for pests and fungal diseases to get started. So instead of protecting the wound, you have created little homes for the exact problems you were trying to prevent. What you actually want is a clean cut, made at the right angle, with a little bit of a stub left, not cut flush to the trunk, but close. And then you just leave it. Open air, natural healing. It works beautifully when the cut is done correctly. Now there is one real exception here, and I want to be clear about it because it matters. If you are pruning oak trees or elm trees during the growing season, you should apply a latex-based paint specifically formulated for this purpose right over the cuts. And the reason is not general wound healing. The reason is that certain beetles are attracted to fresh pruning wounds on these species and can transmit serious diseases. For oaks, that's oak wilt. For elms, that's Dutch elm disease. In those specific cases, Covering the cut quickly is a genuine disease prevention strategy. But for everything else, put the black goo down and step away from the tree. Myth 10. A front yard has to have a lawn. We are finishing with a myth that is less about plant care and more about design thinking. And it might be the one that costs homeowners the most money and water year after year. The idea that a front yard, by definition, needs to have a lawn. I think this comes from a very specific cultural image of what a neighborhood is supposed to look like. And look, if you grew up anywhere near a suburb built between 1950 and 1990, you know exactly the image I'm talking about. Green grass from the sidewalk to the front door, maybe a shrub or two under the window, and a tree in the corner. That is the template. And an enormous number of people are still following that template without ever stopping to ask whether it actually works for them. Here is the question I would ask instead. How do you actually use your front yard? Do you play on it? Do your kids or your pets run on it? Is it a functional outdoor space that benefits from turf? If the answer is yes, then a lawn makes sense. A lawn is genuinely the right surface for active use. It is comfortable, it is durable, it handles foot traffic, it is great for the things you actually do on grass. But if the honest answer is that you walk through it to get to the front door and then you never look back, then what you have is a very expensive, very water-intensive maintenance commitment, in exchange for a view that mostly other people enjoy more than you do. And you have options. You can use the front yard to create a courtyard that extends your usable living space. You can plant a low-water, low-maintenance landscape of natives and ornamental grasses that looks beautiful year-round and costs you almost nothing to keep. You can grow edible plants. You can create a space that has meaning and function instead of just filling the square footage with something green, because that is what the neighbors have. Think about how you are going to use it. Think about what you want to maintain. Think about your water situation, and then pick your surface. Sometimes that is grass. Sometimes it is not. But it should always be a choice, not a default. So that is 10 myths debunked, and I hope at least a few of those made you think twice about something you have been doing in your garden. The best thing about learning that something you have been doing is wrong is that you get to stop doing it immediately and things start to get better right away. That is kind of a gift. If you want more of this, real, practical, experience-based advice for making your landscape healthier and lower maintenance, please subscribe to the channel. We put out new videos every single week. They are completely free, and I promise you we will keep calling out the myths as long as they keep getting passed around. We will see you in the next one.